pursuing her computer science master at TU Munich. And previously, she also did 2 internships at Google. And we have Kilian Schulte, who is the co-founder of Upright and also currently studying computer science at TU Munich. And the both of them are going to give us a quick introduction into Flutter. So stage is yours.
Thanks, Flo. So welcome to our introduction into Flutter. My name is Viviana, as you already said. And I'm here today with Kilian, my dear friend and colleague. And we've... Sorry? Oh, hi. Can you also switch to the next screen, please?
Yes.
Yeah, great. We've been working together as Flutter freelancers for quite a while now, and we're hoping to get you started on your first Flutter steps today. So what are we going to do today? First of all, we're going to show you what Flutter is all about and what it can do. And then we will build this awesome app, Cat Tinder, which you can see on the right side, where you can slide to the right if you see an awesome cat and then save it in your favorites, or swipe left if you don't like that cat. So definitely a very useful app for everyday use. So what is Flutter? Flutter is a cross-platform UI framework. What does that mean? Well, cross-platform means that you can write a single code base and then you can compile it into whatever platform you need. For example, in Flutter, you can not only compile it to Android and iOS, but also into a web app, which is which most of the common browsers can work with, and even desktop apps like Windows, Linux, and macOS. So that's really cool about Flutter. Flutter is a UI framework. So it is intended to write beautiful front-end designs. So it has a lot of default UI components that you can directly use, and they already look really beautiful. However, of course, you can also customize all of them however you like them, so you are very free with your creative designs as well. And I'm saying framework here because Flutter is not the programming language. The programming language behind this is Dart, a programming language developed by Google in 2015. On the right side here, you can see a code snippet of Dart. And if you have written any programming language before, you can see that you probably have no problems at all learning this language or understanding how it works. And even if you haven't programmed before, Dart is a really easy language to learn. Some things that we really like about Dart as well is that it offers type safety and null safety. It runs, enables asynchronous execution, but runs on a single thread, which means you don't have to handle like locking mechanisms and so on. And lastly, even though Flutter is very front-end heavy, Dart itself can also be used easily in backend. So this gives you a really great opportunity to do code sharing even between the front-end and the backend, which is really awesome. So if you're not convinced yet, there are even more reasons why you should learn Flutter. First of all, there's a large community of Flutter developers all over the world, and it's growing rapidly right now. So it's really awesome to get to know other people and exchange creative ideas with them. Flutter is also, as I said, really easy to learn. So it's very satisfying to see your app come to life with a short period of time and it getting more and more beautiful. Flutter is 100% open source, so you can even contribute towards the development of this framework if you want to. And because of the awesomeness of Flutter, a lot of companies are switching to Flutter right now. So if you can write Flutter apps, you will probably have a lot of job opportunities as well. Lastly, Flutter is also used internally by Google, which means that there will be steady support for this framework, so it's very future-proof as well. So now that you know how awesome Flutter is, let's get started with the actual coding. I think we sent an email before, but let's recap again. Before you can start coding, obviously you have to install everything. For that, please go to this link. By the way, we are sharing the Flutter slides also with the link on the bottom right if you want to look up this link. Please look up what you need for your platform, and there's like detailed instructions for your installation. But basically, it's all the same. You have to download and install the SDKs and install an IDE of your choice, but we really recommend Android Studio for this. And then you set up your IDE, which means for the Android Studio case, you have to install the plugins or extensions for Flutter. And lastly, if you want to program an app for a mobile phone, also install an emulator or enable USB debugging for your real mobile phone. So now that we've set up everything, Kilian will show you what we are building today.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so let's have a look what we are building today. So you can see the app here. You saw already a screenshot of it. We have like these swiping card stack where you can swipe either to the left or to the right. And whenever you swipe right, you can switch to your favorites, and then you see all your favorite cats here. I can maybe swipe a bit more. I don't know why I get always the grumpy cat, but okay, this is a very beautiful cat, and it shows up here in your favorites. We can also use the buttons here to use them. Yeah, so very simple app, and let's start right with what we are building today. So when you start a new Flutter project, you have two options. So when you use Android Studio, you can actually directly create a new Flutter project from Android Studio. And this is really nice. It gives you a look over all the options that you can define for a Flutter project, and you can it walks you through what you have to do. But we are not actually doing this today, so because I want to show you another option, which is just typing in a little command, which is Flutter create, and then you can give it any name. I just type my app, hit enter, and then it creates the Flutter project for you with a nice little demo app. So I'm going to open this now in Android Studio, and we can have a look. All right. So I'm just going to start this on my phone, and let's have a look at the folder structure first. So you see a couple of folders here: Android folder, iOS folder, and a web folder. These are the folders for your native code. So whenever when you have already developed like an Android app, you will notice some of these files, and you probably only need to look at them really if you want to do some native stuff. But most of the time you don't have to use those folders. The most important folder here actually is the lib folder. This is where all your Flutter code actually lives in, and we have here one file, main.dart. We will look at that in a bit. One very important file is also the pubspec.yaml. This is the definition file for your project. So you can have your name of the project, you can give it a description. You have the version you can define here, and this is also the version that will be used in the Android and iOS apps, also in the app stores if you export to them. So it's really easy. You can just define the version once, and it will be used for all your different apps. And also one very important thing here are the dependencies. So Flutter or Dart has a very big range of awesome packages that you can use, where people have built already lots of stuff for you, so you don't have to reinvent your wheel every time. So yeah, that's pretty awesome, and we're going to use that today also. All right, so here's the demo app. This is what is generated by the Flutter create command. You get a app bar with the title. You have some text, and you have a button here. And when you press this button, the counter on the screen just goes up here. So it's a very nice starting point for your project. We're also going to build on that. So let's look at the code actually. Yeah, so this is start code. You start with the void main. This is the entry point to your app. You have a run function, and then you call your first widget, which is defined here. Now, before I go any further, you might ask yourself, what is a widget? And I'm going to head back to the slides here to tell you a little bit about that. So in Flutter, really everything is a widget. So everything you see on screen, every UI element, every layout element is a widget. And so the whole app is built of a structure of widget. And in Flutter, we call this the widget tree. So you have a tree-like structure of widgets, and each widget, here a container is a widget or row. We will talk about that later, what exactly these are. But each widget then can have a child, or in case of the row, multiple childs. And yeah, you build your layout like that. And because Flutter is a UI framework, you already get really lots of standard and awesome widgets directly with Flutter that you can really use out of the box. So there are really nice widgets that you can already use. of course, when we build an app, it can get pretty huge rather quickly. Like you get a massive widget tree when you do all your widgets in one place. So one very important mechanism in Flutter development is that you define your own custom widgets. And you can do that by like bundling a certain part of your widget tree together. So in this case, we define a widget named my custom widget, and this bundles the column, icon, container, and text into one custom widget that you can then also use in different places throughout your app. And just as a little reminder, since everything in Flutter is a widget, your whole app is also just another widget that you define. So your complete app is just a widget that is like has all the properties that a normal custom widget would have. So how do we actually write a custom widget? So first we need to define a new class. So here we have class my custom widget again, and you have to extend the stateless widget class, which is provided by Flutter. And then in this class, you have one major method, which is the build method. And the build method really is the place where you define your widget tree, and you go really more or less, you translate your widget tree more or less directly into code. So at first we want to return a column widget here. Then the column has some children. In our case, it has an icon and a container as its children. So we say we want an icon and a container, and then the container itself again has a text widget as a child. So this is what your build methods will look like. Also, we don't only have like the child properties. All the widgets have their own like a lot of custom properties. Like an icon, of course, has your icon, but also like a size for the icon or a color of the icon. And a text, for example, has a text and maybe a font style or a font color and stuff like that. And you define all those here in your build method. All right, so let's take a look back at the code, how this looks like. Okay, so I mentioned the main method, and we run our app. And here, what I talked about, our app, our entry point is already a custom widget, right? We have the extend the status widget class, and we override the build method. Now, here we return a material app. This is just another widget which comes with the Flutter framework. So it's a very nice starting point for your app. It does a lot of things for you, like navigation, theming, and stuff. So we give it a title, we give it a theme. This is also a very nice feature. A theme is where you can define all your primary colors or your text styles or just more or less any styles throughout your app. And when you do this here, once in the theme, the color gets actually reused in lots of different widgets. So in our case, we define a primary color of blue, and you see this color here in the demo app gets used one in the app bar, but also in the little action button here. And if we change that color to, let's say, red, we just have to change it here in one place. And when we save, both of these colors get updated. And here you see already a very nice development feature of Flutter, which is hot reload. So I just saved the file, edited something, and it automatically reloaded the app. So you don't have to install it every time when you change something in your code. All right, then we go on. We have the My Homepage, which is another widget. And this looks a bit different, right? So we don't extend the stateless, but we extend a stateful widget. And this is a special type of widget. So as the name suggests, the stateful widget actually has some state that is holds and represents. So in our case, the state that we have is here the counter of the button, right? So when we click the button, the counter increases, and we have to keep this as a state in our app. So whenever you have to keep some internal values, some variables, then you probably need to use a stateful widget. And this is defined like you have the class here, the widget class, and this doesn't have a build method. Instead, we have a separate class, which is a state class, and this is directly linked to your widget class. We have the state class, and then the state class actually has the build method in it. And this is The build method then again is how you would normally define a build method. But also we have this variable here, and this is our state for the widget. So we have the counter, which is an int, obviously, which here counts the button clicks. All right. So, and then here in the build method, we have a scaffold, which is some widget by Flutter. We have an app bar, some more widgets. Most importantly, maybe here the text widget, which displays the current value of our counter. And then down here we have a floating action button with it, a widget which is again directly comes from Flutter and provided by the Flutter framework. One thing I also want to show you is here on the right side we have the Flutter inspector, and here you can see really nice your current widget tree of your app. So which widget you have, and you also can highlight the widgets. So when I click on one of those, we jump to the position in the code where this widget actually is. And second of all, it highlights the widget directly in the app. So this is a great tool for debugging, for looking up. We also have some properties down here about the widgets. And it's a great tool to look at your current widget tree and how this is built up. All right. So I guess let's start with building our app. All right, I'm going to delete a few of the comments here. I'm also want to switch back to blue. Then I want to give it a little background color. So we say we have a scaffold background color, which is like a pretty light grayish tone. I'm also going to disable the highlighting here. And also going to change the title here to our title of the app, which is Cat Tinder. All right, and I save, and you see again it automatically reloads here the title and the color. All right, continue. Gonna delete a bit here. We don't need our counter stuff. Let's see. We're gonna keep the app bar, but I'm gonna remove pretty much all the rest of it. And just to make sure that it compiles right now, I'm gonna set a placeholder widget, which is a nice thing when you're like developing the wireframe of your app. It just displays like this cross here, and you can see the size and the layout of your widget where you set a placeholder. All right, one thing I'm also going to do is back up here, I'm going to disable this little debug banner right in the corner. So you have a property in the material app where you can set the default and the debug banner gets hidden. Okay, so let's look at what we want to build today again. So we have the swipeable cards here. We also have this bottom navigation bar, and this is what I want to focus on at first. So I want to see that our navigation and our bottom bar here works. So let's see, the scaffold widget here that we have here actually has already a property for this, which is called bottom navigation bar, and we have to provide it with a bottom navigation bar widget. And this is just another widget which already comes with Flutter, pretty awesome. We don't have to do much to get this to work. I just have to enter some items, and we have two items, right? We have two buttons here, a cats button and a favorites button. So the first item is going to be a bottom navigation bar item with a label of cats and an icon. We thought this icon looked a little bit like the cards that we have. And the second item is the favorites. So we have give it a label of favorites and give it an icon with this like this heart. And we can save this. I'm going to switch back to our demo app. And we already see here the bottom navigation bar, which already looks nice. It also has the primary color that we defined in our theme. So pretty cool stuff. We didn't have to do much. Now when we click on it, we see it doesn't work, right? So it doesn't do anything. And this is because right now the bottom navigation bar doesn't have any indication on what page or on what button we actually are. So we have to implement a way to set the current page. And you might already guess this, we need some state for it, right? So we go up here and we have to define a state variable that we're going to use. And I'm going to call this is an int, and going to call this page index. And we start at page now, at 0, I mean. And then we have to provide it to the bottom navigation bar with the current index property. I'm going to say page index here. Save that. Additionally, we have to define a callback, which is called whenever we tap on one of the items, and then we have to assign the page index variable to the index. One thing very important here, we are in a stateful widget, and whenever you mutate a state variable here, you have to call setState around it. And this is because we have to tell the Flutter framework that something in the state changes so that it updates the UI. So if we wouldn't do that, the UI wouldn't update, right? We wouldn't see any change because Flutter only re-renders the UI when we actually say it to here with the setState method. All right, let's save this. Let's see. And we see we now can switch between our two buttons. And also to prove to you that it really works, I'm gonna replace the body, the placeholder here, with a text which just displays our index. So we have the little 1 on top here. And if we change to cats, we have the 0 here. So now we can really start building our UI. But before we're going to do that, Vivi is going to tell you a little bit about some very basic widgets that come with Flutter that you can use in your UI.
Thanks. So the first widget I want to talk about is the container widget. So this is a very, very basic widget in front-end development. And if you haven't done any front-end development yet, basically you can imagine it like just a rectangle. But this rectangle has a lot of different properties that you can set. So first of all, it can have a child, which you already saw. It's basically just another widget. For example, if you want to have a text inside of this rectangle, then you put a text widget into this child. You can set a color of the rectangle, for example, blue. You can set a margin, which is the outside space. So it's basically a space that it adds on around the rectangle on the outside space, basically. In this case, it adds 10 units on all sides of the rectangle. Then you have the padding, which is the inside space. So basically the space that it adds around its child. So for example, if we set a text widget into the child, then this is what it adds around the text. In this case, again, it puts 10 units on all sides of the child. We have an alignment, which is where the child is inside of the rectangle. For example, in this case, it's in the center of the rectangle. We can have a width, a height, and many other things, however you like it. So the container is a really general widget that you can use probably for a lot of things and change it up however you want. Now, for many cases, you don't need an entire container to do the job. Maybe sometimes you only want to add some space around the text. For that, you can actually use some custom containers. So padding, for example, the padding widget only has 2 attributes, the padding and the child. So this is, as I said, the case if you have a text widget and you just want to add some space around that text, then you can use a padding widget. In this case, it adds a padding of 16 units on all sides of the text and looks like this. You don't obviously always have to add it on all sides of the text or the widget. You can also just add it on the horizontal side like this. Or you can say which side precisely you want to add how much space. So the padding widget is the way to go if you just want to add some spacing around something. There's also other special container widgets like the align widget, which obviously only has the alignment attribute and the child, and it enables you to say where you should place this text widget or the child widget inside of the available space. So in this case, we're putting it on the top left of the space. There's an even more specific widget, the center widget, because you need it so often that you want to center something inside of the available space that there's actually a specific widget for that. And obviously this widget does not have any other attributes other than the child, because the rest is kind of clear, right? All right, so you already saw the text widget, and you can obviously also customize the text widget. So the first attribute is the string that it should show, but then you can also customize it with adding a text style, for example, the color, the font size, the font weight, but you can also add some more stuff like how many lines it can have maximum and how it should behave if the text is too long for the available space. There's also another very basic widget that you will probably need also, the icon widget. And the nice thing about Flutter, as I said before, is that most of the front-end stuff is already built in Flutter, and one example of that is they have a huge set of icon assets already pre-built into the language, so you don't need to like download icons or anything. They have a lot of material icons already. In this case, you can directly add it with icons dot and then whatever you want. In this case, I took the add icon, so it's just a plus sign. But you can also add or customize this, of course. So the color, you can have a size and whatever you want. Yeah, so those are some very basic design widgets, but what if we want to do a little bit more sophisticated widgets? And I think you already saw a little bit of that previously, but I want to go through it step by step again. So let's see, we have this thing where we have 3 elements next to each other, and if you have things next to each other, this is typically a row, right? They're side by side. So there's this row widget which does not have a child attribute as the previous ones, but it has children. And children does not take a single widget, but it takes a list of widgets, which you can see with these like brackets. In this case, we have 3 widgets in the row, so we have 3 elements in this list. Let's take a look at one single element of those. So you see on the top it has an icon widget, and on the bottom it has a text widget. If you have elements on top of each other, this is the same principle as the row, but on a vertical side, so it's called column. So obviously you again have a column widget, which takes a list of widgets as children attribute. And obviously in this case, we have the icon widget as the first child and the text widget as the second child. So that's how you do very basic layouting, and you can already do loads of stuff with this basic 2 layouting widgets. Now, one last thing I want to talk about before we get back to the code is adding interactivity. So far, everything has only been that you can look at it, but you can't really interact with it. One very common way to do interaction is with buttons, obviously, in apps. And Flutter has a lot of pre-designed, pre-built buttons that you can use, such as this elevated button widget, which, as you can see, has like shadows around it and rounded borders and a color. Looks really nice already. But obviously Flutter has also a lot of other widgets that you can use for buttons that you can also freely design however you want to. So the basic principle is always the same. You have a child, which is the widget that is shown on top of the button. And then you have an onPressed attribute, which in this case does not take a single value as the previous widgets, but instead it takes a function. If you know what a lambda function is, you will probably also understand what this does. But basically, it executes whatever is inside of these curly brackets whenever the button is pressed. In this case, it just prints this string. Sometimes you press a button and then you want to execute a lot of stuff and you don't want to clutter your entire widget tree code with just function stuff. So sometimes it makes sense to extract your functionality into a named function like this. So on the bottom you can see we just wrote a normal function with a return type and the function body. And then in the button itself, you don't write it like on the left side, but you just say whenever the button is pressed, you should call this function that has the name on button pressed, which is further down the code. So that's some of the very basic widgets that we will see today. And with that, I'm going to give back to Kilian to show you how to code.
All right. So let's see where we left off. We built our button navigation bar. We have 2 buttons here. We can switch between them, and we display the index where we're at on top of there. Now, when we actually want to do the layout, we don't want like display a text and change just the text, but actually what we want to do is change between 2 pages or like 2 widgets, because everything is widget. And we're going to do this by just here exchange this with a ternary operator. If we don't know what that is, it's basically just an if statement. So we can write if page index x 0. Then we're gonna display 1 widget, and in this case I want to just display like a blue container, so I say a container with the color of blue. And if it's not, so if it's like 1, I want to display, let's say, a red container here. All right, and now we can see, we can test this out. We have a red screen here when we are on favorites, and we have a blue screen when we are on the cats. Now, let's continue. Of course, we don't want to do a container, but a more like sophisticated layout. And now we could like continue here in our widget tree and just build this up, add more widget to it. But this can get large pretty quickly. And we want to change this up with a custom widget, like I told you in the beginning. So what we're going to do, like, I want to have a custom widget called card stack page, because this is where we're going to build our card stack. And this is, of course, not existent yet, so we have to create it. And we go down here. We have to create a new class for that. And now we could like write class card stack page and so on, extends stateless widget. But Android Studio also provides a snippet for that. So we can just do stateless, press enter, and then it creates a snippet for us. And we just have to enter the name, card stack page. And so it provides this for us. When I save it, it's back to gray because we have now here an empty container without the color. But this we see that it works because we exchanged here the blue container. All right, now we have to build our actual card stack. And I'm not going to do this by myself because like I'm too lazy. And also there are a lot of awesome Flutter developers that already have done that for you. So what we're actually going to do is we use a packet for this. And there's the this website here, pub.dev, where you can search for all the packages that you might want. So in our case, we already looked something up, which is called swipe stack. It's the first entry here, and this is a package which does exactly what we want, right? Because we have our stack of images here, and we can swipe it to left or right. We can have, there's some additional documentation about how we're going to use these widgets, and also how we're going to install this. And what we have to do is here on top, we have to click this little copy icon, and this will copy the version code for us. So we can go back to our code. I'm going to go to the pubstack.yaml. This is where our dependencies, so our packages, are defined. I'm going to paste this, what we just copied here. This is swipe stack and the version, which is 1.00. I'm going to save, and I'm going to hit this pub.get. This is another cool thing from Android Studio, that you can just press it. But basically what this does is just execute this command, which you can also like execute by yourself in the terminal, which installs all the packages. I'm also add another packet, which we're going to use later, which is the HTTP packet, because like we have all these images of cats and we got to get them from somewhere, and we have there's a cat API, a cat images API that we're going to use, and so we have to do some HTTP calls for that. All right, so let's get back to the code. And now we can directly use our widgets that come from the packet. So we have now a new widget, which is called swipe stack. And this is, you can see from the swipe stack package here. When we press enter, it completes this for us. But also what it does, it adds an import statement right on top here for the package. All right, and then we have a children's property where we have to put our cards, right? Now we don't have any images of cats yet, so we can't really put anything there. So we have to do that first, actually. And so you can think of it like we have to load a list of cat images and we have to store them. So what we actually need is internal state. So I go back here to our stateful widget, and I'm going to add a new state variable, which is a list of images, and I'm going to set this to an empty list. Then we have to load these images, and like what we want to do is we want to do this once when we first open the app, right? So you don't want to load it every time like we render or every time the build message is called. So we have to do it somewhere where it's just executed once, and we can do that by the with the initState method. And this is a method that we can override, which comes from the stateful widget. So we do that. We have to call also the super method here. And here we can execute the state. And this is called once we actually use this widget for the very first time. So what we have to do is we have to do a GET request to our cat API. And also this comes from the HTTP library. So we have to import the library, which adds our import statement on top here. And then we do the GET request, we get a result, and then we have to pass the result. So we have to get the body that we get from the request, we have to decode it, we have to import another library for this, but this is a library that directly comes with Flutter. So we don't have to install any packages for this. We just have to import it. And so we decoded our cat images, and then we set our images variable to the cat images. And again, you see here the set state that we have to call because we are mutating some state variables. So we have to call our set state method, and this is really important. So we get something. All right, let's get back down to our swipe stack. And here we have like a little bit of a problem because we are in different class, right? So we can't just use like the images variable here because we don't have access to it. So what we have to do is we have to pass the images property down to the card stack page. And like, remember, we called this here, like we accessed our custom widget. I'm just gonna enter the images variable here. And then we have to also create a constructor for this, which takes this and defines it as a new property in this class. So we have, again, a list of images. Right, and now we can use our images in here. So what we're going to use is, some of you might know this, which is a map function on the images. For those of you who don't know what a map function is, what it does basically, it iterates over all the images, and for each image, it takes the image and converts it to something different, like a widget. And then this results then in a list of widgets. So we get in a list of images, and we get out a list of widgets. So in this, here in the middle section, we have to actually return a widget. And we're going to use a second widget that comes from the swiper package that we installed, which is swiper item. We have another widget, which is clip-rect, that comes with Flutter. This is just a nice little widget that adds some border radius around our image. And then we have an image, actually, that displays then the image and takes the URL that we got from our HTTP call. All right, and now I'm going to save this. And let's see. Yeah, so we don't see anything yet. Why is that? And this is because our hot reload that Flutter does for us is actually stateful. And what does that mean? It means that whenever we reload something, we just reload the UI parts, but we don't reload the state. So we keep any state that we have. But that also means that we don't execute the inState method when we do a hot reload. What we have to do instead is we have to click this button here, and that does like a real restart of our app. So it restarts the whole complete app. And then the inState method will be called. We fetch our images, and then we also can then we display this here in our stack, and we see this popping up here. And since we used the swipe stack, we actually have already the full functionality of these swiping cards. We can swipe left, swipe right, and this already works pretty nice. So now I want to like modify this a bit to make it a bit nicer. And what I want to do is I want to make this a little bit smaller so it doesn't take up the whole screen. So I need to put a container around this swipe stack. And I can do this with a nice key combination with the Alt and Enter. I can say web with widget, and I have to enter the container widget. So what this does is just it takes a container and assigns the swiper stack as a child to this container. And now I can enter additional property like a height for this container, and I set it like to 600. And now, yeah, we see that the cards aren't the full height anymore. Additionally, I want to center those now, and you have already seen this widget. So I press again Alt and Enter. And I say here, wrap the center, and it automatically wraps our container with a center widget. So when I save it, again, it's now centered. And this already looks pretty nice, I guess. All right, now let's continue. We have our swiping cards, but we don't do anything yet, right? So we just display the cards, but nothing happens here. We don't have any favorites yet. We didn't do the page yet. So what we're going to do is we have to hook into our swiper stack to get actually the information when we swipe. And there's, besides the children, there's actually another property here, which is the onSwipe callback. And this is called whenever we swipe a card to one of those sites. And what we get is we get the index of the image that we swiped, and we get a position. And this position is either a left position or a right position. So what we're going to do, we just say we do an if statement, and if position is right, we want to favorite the image. And if the position is left, we want to discard the image. All right. Now, in order to do that, to favorite an image, we need something, right? Because we need a variable to store our favorite images. So we need a new state variable. So we go again back up here where all our state is. We say we have a new list, which is now called favorites. And we assign it again to an empty list. Also, I'm going to add 2 more methods to this stateful widget class. One method is the favorite method. It gets an index. It removes an image from the images array, and it adds this image to the favorites array or list. And of course, again, we mutate our variables, so we have to call setState around it. The second method is a skip method. We again get the index of the image, and we just remove the image, so we discard it so it doesn't get shown in the stack anymore. And again, we call our setState method. All right, so let's get back down here. And now we again at this position where we have like our where we are in a different widget, right? We can't directly access these methods here because we are in a different class. And there comes a really nice feature of Flutter into play. I'm going to open the inspector again to show you. Because we have our widget tree, right? And we are here in the card stack page down here. And we want to access the method in my homepage widget. So we want to have to access an ancestor or a parent widget of where we are currently. And we do this by, you might have noticed in the build method, we have a build context that comes as a parameter to the build method. And we can use the context, which is basically just it tells us the position at where we are in our widget tree here. And we can also use the context to look up some ancestor widgets, which are like above us in the widget tree. So what we can do, we can say context.find. We have some methods here, which we can choose of. I'm going to choose find ancestor state of type because we want to find a state. Because yeah, we are looking for the my homepage with a stateful widget. We have to provide the state class. And then if I type dot, we have all the things that we can do, and we see we are in the right class indeed. We have our favorites list, we have our images list, and also we have our favorite and skip functions that we can now call. And I'm going to do that. Call it with the index that is provided from the onSwipe callback. And also, let's close this. I'm going to copy this. And for the left swipe, we want to call the skip method. Right. Save this. Yeah, we can't really test if that works because we have nothing yet. We don't have our favorites page, but I'm just going to add like a little print statement here to show you actually that it works. So let's print out the index when we favorite something. And now whenever we swipe right, we get the output of the index with fav. And if we swipe left, we don't get any output. I didn't put a print statement here, but we can think that this works right now. All right. Let's remove this again and continue. So next step, what we have to do is we have to do our favorites page, right? So we have to do pretty much the same. We have to create a new custom widget instead of our red container here. So let's say we name it a favorites page. And then we go really down. We again have to create the new widget class for this. And I'm going to again use the snippet that Android Studio has. Let's give it again the name. All right. And now this should be fine here. If I save it, we can have our empty container here. Now we have to do something similar with the images. Of course, we have to provide the favorites list to our new custom widget so that it can display those. So I'm going to pass the favorites list down here. I'm going to have to create a new list here. Now we're going to create the constructor for this, which you can do with Command N. You can say constructor, and it automatically creates the constructor for you. All right. The last thing to do, we actually have to now display the images, and we want to display them as a list, so we can scroll through them. Again, there's of course, there's a pre-built widget that you can use, which is called list view, that comes with Flutter, and you have to give it a list of children. And in our case, of course, we want to give it the images as children. And we're going to use again the map function for this. So we say favorites.map, and for each image that we get, we return a image widget and use the URL to load the image from the network. Okay, let's save this and see. And now we see we already have some images here. We have a scrollable list, and this is again because we have a hot reload which preserves actually the state. So we preserve the favorites. We already had those in memory, and we don't have to swipe again to get this. But again, I can swipe some more. Let's see if we can find a really beautiful cat like this one. Yeah, and now it gets displayed here at the bottom. All right. So one last thing to do, I guess, is to add those little buttons down here. And then we are pretty much done. So we have to go back to our card stack page. And now we have to add buttons below our swiping stack. So what we're going to use is we're going to use a column, right? Because we want to display stuff underneath each other. So we're going to wrap the container actually. So let's say wrap with a column, and you already have this option here. So we have a lot of like widgets that you're going to use really often. You have already them here, or you can use wrap with any widget. I'm going to wrap this column. So it automatically here inserts the column and the children list here with your container now, which is currently the only element in here. And so we're gonna can add a new element here. And now we have two buttons which we want to display next to each other. So next thing we're gonna add a row again with the children list. And now we have two buttons, right? So the first button, and I'm going to use the icon button widget, which is a special kind of button which just displays an icon, and we give it a color of red. We give it an icon, which is like this X, and it has an on-pressed callback, as Vivi explained. I'm going to fill this in later. But first, I'm going to add the second button. So next to this, we have a green button, which is checked here and on pressed. All right. I have to add two more things. I have to first add to the column some additional property to give it a size, because otherwise the column would just take up the whole screen. And also, let's say, okay, I can save it. Now we see the buttons aligned to the left here. This is because we have to give our row an additional property to say how we want to align the children. And we want to align our children to the center here. Let's save this. Now we have our two buttons at the center. I think they are a little bit too close to each other. So what I'm going to do, I add a padding around them. So again, press Option and Enter. Here we have the padding option already. By default, it adds a on all sides with 8 units, but I'm going to change it. I just want to be in the horizontal axis. So I say symmetric and horizontal. And also I'm going to like copy this here to add it to the second button. Save this. And now we have some padding around it. And also, again, we can look at our widget inspector, look how this looks. So we have our row, which is here. And we have our first padding and the first button, which is a little bit in the horizontal space, a little bit less wide. So pretty great and exactly how we want it. Now, last thing to do, we have to add our on-pressed callback because we don't do anything yet. And we can pretty much use the same methods as we used for the on-swipe callback. So for our green button, we want to do call the favorite method. we have to provide it with an index. In this case, we have to provide it actually with the last index, because the stack displays the images in reverse order. So what we see is actually the last image of the list. So we have to say we have the images at length -1, so the last index. And same thing for the close button, except we call this skip method. Let's save this and let's test it out. And we have to disable the highlighting. All right. Yeah, pressing this, and let's see in our favorites. Yeah, it shows up at the button, at the bottom. So pretty great. Now, when you have like completed your app, one last thing you can do is to actually build it. And so, for example, if we want to build one for Android, you can say Flutter build, this build command, and then you can maybe add APK that would build for Android, or you say iOS that will build for iOS, and also you can say build web and stuff like that. So yeah, and with that, I think I'm done. I'm not going to wait for that. And yeah, for now.
Yeah, so now you know how to do like basic coding. We know it was quite fast, but we have linked the repository in our slides, and you know how to get the slides, right? So if you want to look it up in like your pace and read through it, feel free to do that. And there's also much more to learn, obviously. We only showed you the very basic stuff. For learning more about Flutter, feel free to go to flutter.dev. They have a lot of really great learning resources. They have code labs, which are really great tutorials with a lot of examples. They have a cookbook. If you have something specific in mind that you want to do, then most often you will find it there and how to do that. They have a widget catalog, which is a set of widgets that exist and how to use them and how they look. And lastly, a really great playlist is the Flutter Widget of the Week from their team, where they present really awesome widgets and how to use them again in a really nice way. Then there's Dart.dev if you want to learn more about the language itself. One of the resources that we can recommend is the design guidelines. If you want to know how to specifically name your methods or your class names and so on, look it up there. And one resource we also really like is Dartpad. If you just really quickly want to try some Dart logic out without having to open your IDE or anything, then you can go to dartpad.dev and just enter it there. Lastly, we're also on Slack. We have the Flutter channel. If you have any questions or need help setting up anything, feel free to ask us there. And with that, yeah, we're looking forward to either questions or just your awesome projects. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you.